trashing the Caribbean island of Martinique. Hurricane Maria, a powerful Category 4 storm, is now barreling towards Puerto Rico.
We are very worried.
Today in San Juan, a frantic scramble for supplies. Again, just days after Irma, Maria has rapidly intensified. The government now declaring a state of emergency, rationing basic provisions like water and baby formula.
There's no water anywhere. I can't find water, I can't find ice.
While Irma decimated islands like Barbuda, it only grazed Puerto Rico, but still knocked out electricity to 75% of the island, more than 60,000 customers still in the dark. This spree of storms exposing problems with its fragile power grid and crumbling infrastructure. Among the hardest hit areas by Irma, the coastal town of Loíza. Debris still piled on the street. Nancy Pizarro rode out Irma in her home when a tree fell through her roof. Now she's terrified of what Maria might bring. The island hasn't seen a Category 4 or 5 storm since 1932.
It's going to be a challenge.
Today, Puerto Rico's governor, Ricardo Rosselló, urged people in flood-prone areas to get out.
It's the difference between life and death. It's really that simple.
Puerto Rico was the safe haven for some 3,500 Irma evacuees from other Caribbean islands, some on dialysis still in this shelter. Others, like Gabriel Wilson from St. Thomas, are now desperately trying to find a flight to the U.S. mainland.
I'm thinking, how much more does my home have to take, you know?
Puerto Rico, the island that helped those devastated by Irma, now in Maria's direct path.
A hurricane warning is now in effect for the entire island. The National Weather Service here says it expects catastrophic winds. The government is preparing hundreds of shelters to house more than 100,000.
Storms in the Atlantic. Actually, only 2 of them are ones we really need to be concerned about. Lee, not so much. Jose, I think, is still going to miss the U.S., but Maria is a factor now, and you're saying, well, when did that become a thing? Earlier today, a tropical depression, now a tropical storm, packing 50-mile-an-hour winds and moving steadily to the west and, unfortunately, headed for the eastern Caribbean. In fact, there are hurricane watches in effect for Barbuda and Antigua. Not good news. Expected to become a Category 2 hurricane by Tuesday, possibly Category 3, and impacting Puerto Rico by the middle of the week. I don't like the end of the forecast cone because that's pointed toward the U.S. That's the wrong direction after what we've been dealing with. As far as Jose, it's still out there with 80-mile-an-hour winds. As the Hurricane Hunter planes are flying in and around it today, they did identify some information that helped refine the track. Good news, because it looks like the track will continue to be away from the U.S. Earlier today, the cone of uncertainty was touching places like Long Island, Connecticut, Rhode Island, and Massachusetts, but now less so. Still going to see rip currents up and down the East Coast. We've seen that throughout the day today, but this is not a picture we want to see. Last time we had 13 named storms by this date on the calendar, Boris, was 2012. Remember what year that was? Sandy. We don't want to repeat.
Well, you hear us talk a lot about the models, the European versus the American, and how are they different? We're trying to model an atmosphere that has an infinite number of layers. From where we live to the top of the atmosphere, it's not 9, 12, 13 different layers. It's an infinite number, but you can't put infinity into a computer and expect an answer, because it will just hang up and keep running. The difference between the two models is trying to get a model run that's accurate and timely. Timely meaning we can't have a perfect forecast for a 2-day snowstorm, but it might take 24 hours worth of running the computer to get there. So is a 2-day forecast that's only good for 1 day, is that worth it? No. We try to get it to run in 4 hours or less. Now, the European model does take longer to run. There's more data in the European model, and so therefore it can be slightly more accurate. But the American model is pretty close.
Watch out.
You and your family need to be prepared for a hurricane way before it makes landfall. The number one thing you need to do, get your supplies. You need enough non-perishable food items for 3 days for each person in your family. You also need 1 gallon of water per day for each person. Also make sure you have plenty of batteries and a battery-operated radio, as well as flashlights. Chances are during a hurricane, you will lose power. In that case, your cell phone will lose power as well, so you'll lose all of your contacts. Make sure you make a list of all the emergency contacts that you'll need. Also, have an evacuation plan. Know your evacuation route and familiarize yourself with it. Lastly, get your home ready. If you have hurricane shutters, make sure you know where they are and you know how to install them. Also, prune your trees and gather up any loose items that can become projectiles. In the U.S., flash floods kill more people than tornadoes, hurricanes, or lightning. A flash flood creates a rush of moving water that can sweep a grown man off his feet, a car off the road, and even your entire home off its foundation. When the ground becomes so saturated that water can no longer seep into the soil, it begins to run off quickly into rivers and streams, and this causes a rise in water in a flash. Densely populated areas have an extremely high risk of flash flooding, with the additional concrete and less grassy areas for the water to soak into the soil, and they can see flash flooding very quickly. In mountainous terrain, the combination of gravity plus the easy runoff can lead to catastrophic flooding when all of that water is funneled into rivers, creeks, and even the valleys. Remember, flash flooding can happen in the blink of an eye. That's why it's important to stay alert and pay attention in case a flash flood watch or warning is issued for you.
In Puerto Rico tonight, residents are gearing up for another big hit.
Everybody's getting ready. We're getting ready.
Stocking up on water and wood. Just 1 week after Hurricane Irma demolished parts of the Caribbean and tore through Florida. Now 2 more hurricanes have formed, packing a 1-2 punch.
It's going to be a big deal for Puerto Rico.
Just off the Carolina shore, Hurricane Jose is whipping 90-mile-per-hour winds, creating dangerous currents as it barrels up the east coast. On its heels, Hurricane Maria, strengthening as it heads straight for Barbuda, St. Martin, and the Virgin Islands, all trying to pick up the pieces in the aftermath of the Category 5 strike they faced just days ago.
How critical are the next few days ahead for those places that have already been hit by Hurricane Irma?
Well, they already have the mental anguish and the burden of trying to pick up after Irma has gone through and now bearing down with Maria. There's so much in front of them right now, and still the season has 10 weeks to go.
In Puerto Rico, the governor warning this hurricane could be even worse.
Make sure that your families are safe. We can start the rebuilding process once again after this storm passes.
While neighbors wait anxiously and get ready for round 2.
Just buying some plywood to lock up the doors and windows.
Morgan Radford, NBC News, Miami.